Episode of the Next Big Thing podcast, we are joined by Jon Bullinger of Yéyo Tequila. We discuss what makes Yéyo Tequila one of the best tequilas around, Jon's future vision for the brand, and how he plans to grow the brand in a very crowded tequila market, and much more.
Come join us on our mission to discover the next crowdfunding startup that will change the world. We hope you enjoy the episode. Don't forget to like and comment down below. Bye-bye.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Next Big Thing podcast, where we interview the founders and CEOs of crowdfunding startups. Today, we are joined by Jon Bullinger, the founder of Yéyo Tequila, a tequila born from a passion for discovery and the need to create a perfect tequila. Their tequila is a unique blend of the finest natural-grown agave, hand-selected from the Highlands of Jalisco, Mexico. Jon himself is a tequila aficionado and an experienced e-commerce professional with many years in the digital marketing space. You can find him on Twitter at Jon Bullinger, that's JonBullinger, and on LinkedIn. Yéyo Tequila is currently raising on Start Engine, and we will put the link to their campaign in the description. There's 2 weeks left in their campaign. It'll be 12 days by the day of this release. End of day, August 30th will be the end. So make sure you check it out. And I say that selfishly because I myself am an investor in Yéyo and a big fan of their tequila, especially the newly released Reposado. Fantastic. You should go out and try it. With that being said, Jon, thanks for the time and welcome on the Next Big Thing.
Great. Hey, thank you for the intro and thanks again for having me on the show. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share with you guys here. All right, so yeah, thanks again for having me on the show. Just wanted to kind of cover some points on kind of what Yéyo is all about and why you should be listening to this podcast and hearing more about the brand. Again, I'm Jon Bullinger, the founder, and I do this really because the passion. I don't take any compensation from this brand. Everything we bring in is basically reinvested back in the brand. We all have our day jobs. I've crafted a really solid team that really is passionate about tequila and this project. And I've met some great individuals along the way, and the brand keeps building based on those kind of fundamentals. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So I'd say one of the most important part is partnering with a great master distiller, especially one that's kind of up and coming through the ranks. And Sergio Cruz is one of those. He is, I want to say right now, I think he's rated 13th in the world for master distillers in tequila, and also he's one of five actually that does makes tequila and makes mezcal. So less than 5 people in the world actually do both, and he's one of them. So he's definitely like a chemist and an artist. He also teaches classes at the university on distillation. So he has a huge part of it because he is doing a lot of the scientific work around coming up with the Yéyo profile based on feedback that we've received from consumers and prospects, and that's kind of how we've come up with the kind of cooking methods we've developed over time. I've known him and I've known the Blanco family for over 12 years now. The Blanco family is the distillery we use. Their NUM is 1414. They've actually been in the agave farming business since 1929. So they're 5th generation farmers, and now they're 3rd generation distillers. So they bought their distillery or a farm where they started making tequila about 29 years ago, and they've been doing it ever since. Sergio has been making tequila there for the last 19 years. So he's had quite a bit of time, learning the art, and it's one of those things that it's an ongoing education. You're never perfecting it. It's just a thing where you get better and better over time. So key part of Yéyo is Sergio Cruz, master distiller. And one big thing, like I was mentioning, is the fact that the distillery's been around, and the land's been around 2,000 acres of it actually since 1929, and it keeps kind of growing. It's in a very important part of Mexico. You have the highlands and you have the lowlands, and the agave kind of grows differently in each part of those parts of Mexico. And the highlands, where Yéyo is, agave comes from Yéyo, It's around 6,700 feet above sea level, and the agave is much sweeter because of the soil and the flat ground and the rain. Just the climate makes it a lot sweeter than stuff down in the lowlands, which is more earthy. Everything is single estate. So we know all the history of the land. We know that there wasn't any fertilizer, pesticides. We know what was used in the crop before. Like there's cross cropping is a very important part of allowing the soils to recover. So after the agave would be harvested, you let the grounds just kind of grow back in natural form, and then maybe like a year after that, you plant corn or beans to let the soil kind of rejuvenate and relax before planting agave on it again. That's why it's important to know kind of your history of the land and being single estate, because then you can regulate basically how the next group of agaves is going to turn out and the sugar content that is going to come out of that Pinot, which is where, what you're putting in the brick oven. So the brick oven too is a big part of it. We use above ground ovens in stone. It's a huge part of it as well. And then the extract method is roller mill extract, and this is extracting all the juice after it's done with the oven. And then the water source, the deep water source. Fermenting process depends on the time of the year and the temperature, but it's around 10 to 12 days. And that really is kind of like this Mozart method we use as well, where this music is playing the whole time as we're fermenting. The distillation technique, we use copper pot stills. We feel that copper pot is the best way to go, so we double distill it twice. Every bottle of Yéyo is cleaned with Yéyo, and then before we fill it up. And then the notes and the aromas are all basically based around, your taste profile and kind of where you're used to. So it can vary from person to person, but for the most part, it's there's some very agave forward. There's some citrus notes, and that has a lot to do with all the citrus plants that are on the estate. There's oranges, there's lemons, there's limes, there's a bunch of different citrus plants and trees that are on there, and that has to do with the way kind of some things taste coming out of the distillery in that area with fermenting. So let's go ahead and get into this part here. So again, Yéyo, 5 to 6 years before we harvest the agave. We are confirmed additive free. We don't use any additives. We basically use water, yeast, and agave, and that's basically it. There's really nothing else that goes into it. There shouldn't go into it. So not a lot of ingredients there. Everything is grown single estate. And then our glass is made by Saber Glass. The guys behind Grey Goose. So very, very big glass company. Quality is well done. We use screen printing. We don't use a sticker. We use a frosted glass, which is acid edged on, kind of sprayed on. And then we use a glass topper up here. So this thing's solid glass. And then packaging, we designed this to stand out on shelves. And that's why we use the color yellow in our Blanco. And that's why we use the box too. And then we put this in citrus notes that are at the distillery. And this is really to make it kind of inviting and different and, pop when it's at the retail level, because a lot of the tequilas just blend in as you're going into a package store and you don't even really notice what to pick. So Yéyo definitely stands out on the shelf because of that. And then same thing with it being out of the box, being frosted. So there's a big change there and how we do things. So kind of to get to this elevator pitch, really what makes us different is we have a really unique set of people on our team. We have a lot of innovation that we put into it and a lot of thought. Every decision we make, there is definitely a strategy and there is thought put behind it. So before we make a decision in any direction, there's tons and tons of feedback and comments and conversations we have before going down that path. So this is a continuous thing that we do all the time as the brand kind of evolves and grows. It is really just the innovation and pushing us farther out to where we need to be versus copying kind of what other people are doing in the industry, which is pretty much what most brands do in this industry, is they just kind of copy the norm of what everyone else is doing and they hope they're going to make it. And we don't follow that philosophy. We're kind of the trendsetters in things like different types of barrels that we use, having a treasure map inside of our packaging, which I don't know anyone has ever done anything like that. We have, Yéyo logbook people sign when they come to the distillery, using rum barrels to apple spice barrels, completely different way of looking at things. We focus more on the people and less on the product. Product maybe is only 20% of it, and the rest of it's kind of the people kind of behind it and what they do and kind of the process. So those are some big things that kind of make us different when it comes to this. But yeah, this is a map of Arandas, custom made, Google shot down from our Google map basically that we incorporated. You have the distillery here, the church, which is the center of the whole community for Arandas. And then all these names in here, these are these initials. These are all influencers that push the brand. And then we do a burial once a year. And we have two now. We have another one over here. And we'll have another one in, I think, January. We're going to be burying another one. And this QR code will take you to an unlisted page that will give you more clues on how to find these one-of-one Yéyo bottles that we bury every year that are in these time capsule cylinders. And we really do this to create this two-way engagement with customers and fans and, make it kind of something different than you would normally find in any packaging. So, Yéyo does have about, I would say it takes around 35 people from the moment the agave is planted all the way to harvest to the second you actually get the bottle in front of you in retail. That's how many people actually touch the brand throughout that whole time. It's about 35 people. So there's a lot of people involved. And this is just in general, this is how many people you have to have going through that whole process to actually get it to where it needs to be in front of like a customer. So this is just a portion of the team. Now, this team is not Yéyo employees. These are employees of the distillery, which we partner with. And that's just a small, amount of the team. This is basically just a part of the bottling line, actually. So it takes that many people, actually more than that, to just doing the bottling part because of all the stuff that goes into just bottling alone. If you add on the farmers and everyone else that works there, it would be triple this amount of people in this picture right here. So then this is when I was talking about kind of innovation. We launched this in basically 2023, and this is the new one we're launching. But we launched a program like this in 2023. We sold out in the first 45 days, 12 barrels, and now this is our new one for 2024, where we basically have we've more than doubled our amount of product we're doing, and we've already got commitments in the first 30 days just by word of mouth. So we basically completely sold out of all of these for next year's run. But other than that, it's what drives us is passion, and we enjoy doing this, and we love to create innovation and new profiles to the market, and we really see that that's where we're going is doing things differently than everyone else. So it's kind of it in a nutshell. That's a high level.
Well, thank you for that, John, and I appreciate it. And I like how it's innovation, not just in the product, but also in the packaging. And what I really am excited to talk about is the treasure map. That is such a cool, unique idea. So how did you think about that?
Yeah, so great idea. I'll go ahead and scroll back up to that. So how so my background is I started at Intel in the software group. And my first part of e-commerce is we were basically doing software certifications, and the conversion part to get this independent software vendor to the end where they're certified by Intel was a year long and $100,000 per certification. So just imagine someone going to your shop page and buying a product and then taking a whole year to go through the checkout process. So I learned early on, about consumers and process it goes through, and eventually we shortened that into 3 months, and then I think we dropped the price down to $10,000 per certification. But part of my job was also to fly around the country, meet people, get their feedback on what they liked and disliked about the program, then bring it back to the team, and redesign this certification program so we could make it easier and streamline it for basically people to do more certifications from Intel. So I basically took that knowledge that Intel taught me back then and applied to the rest of my career that I've had in e-commerce. And the main thing here is like, packaging can be very powerful. And if you have something like, if you were to pick up this box of Yéyo, it is extremely inviting, and it makes you just want to grab it because of just the way it feels and like looks, and has a UV spot finish on it. And it's just, that's important, because if you don't have that, they don't pick it up, most likely not going to leave with it. So I was like, why don't we, instead of doing something boring and inside the box, why don't we tell a story? And this is supposed to help tell a story. If you open it and you notice that top part here where it says treasure map inside, just like it does right here in the drawing, you pull it up and now you are learning more about the brand, where it comes from. And if you click on the QR code, you've now been transported into a picture of the Master Distiller, a picture of one of our owners, Ed, and another person that works at the, I think it's Chewy, works at the distillery. And there's a picture of them all finished digging this big hole in the ground that we're burying it. So the connection is gone from a one-way street to a two-way street. And now that person is probably going to learn more. They're probably going to click on the rest of the website, which takes you back to yeyotequila.com, but it's a custom URL that you can only get to through this QR code. So that's really what the vision was, to create this. But we went through, I think, 60 iterations of this. So when it started out, it was just a piece of paper that I was drawing on. And we're still not done with it now. It rapidly changes all the time. I already have a new version that's, I think it's 10 versions after this one that's going to be ready for next year. And the colors even changed, like this dark green color that matches the agave out here. But really, it was about the customer, right? We wanted to connect with them. We wanted to have more than just a purchase. We think the way we feel about one purchase is that the journey isn't over. Like, our conversation is just beginning with the customer when they buy their first bottle. And for most brands, most products, they think that's the end. But that's like just the beginning on how we see it. And that's how we've been getting, our customers have been buying. They don't buy one bottle, they buy 3, they buy 6, and they keep coming back and buying more. It's not just a one-time purchase. So things like this, I think, help draw that connection with the brand and customers, and it turns into not just a product, but more of a relationship and that two-way conversation. So that's why we did it, and we'll continue to do it. And it's even on our case boxes too. If you flip around our big case boxes, there's a portion of the map as well.
So you mentioned Yéyo Tequila as a company are very customer focused, and you keep mentioning this customer loyalty. And I noticed when I looked on reviews, I was shocked at just how many people highly rated Yéyo Tequila consistently. And it was just over and over and over again. So my question is, what makes Yéyo Tequila different than the other tequila brands? Why do people like Yéyo Tequila, and why is the quality so much better than the other tequila brands?
Yeah. So when we set out to do this, we had I did the same thing I did at Intel. I started with a couple different bottles, several different logos, and I started there. And I talked to bartenders, I talked to normal people that buy tequila, and I asked their opinion, what they like and dislike. And I think we had 12 bottles in total that we started with, and I ended up just cement gluing the logo on these bottles. And some of these bottles were bottles that I bought at the store. Some of them were bottles that I was able to get. And then I asked bartenders, female and male, what you like and dislike about this. Is it easy to pour? And the same thing with these small focus groups I would do. And even down to the name and down to the logo, and we got feedback, and that's kind of how we crafted this. Wasn't just in this small circle of people, but it was with real prospects that were going to be buying the brand, and that's kind of how we made the decisions. To make it different by using frosted glass in tequila is like unheard of. Normally you see that in vodka, you would never see it in the tequila category. But we also didn't want to have the same looking tequila right next to the same looking tequila. And if you go to a liquor store and you see Yéyo on the shelf, it definitely stands out from the rest. Just with the agave leaves and the citrus notes and the yellow packaging, it does not look like the other 50 or 60 other tequilas that are on the shelf. It definitely stands out. And at the bottom here, this is what Yéyo means to us. Yéyo also is another common name in Mexico for Sergio, believe it or not. And the way you say Yéyo in Mexico, let's just say in Jalisco, you say it with J, it's not Y, so it's Yéyo. And that is a common term for the word Sergio. So, the Master Distiller, Sergio Cruz, the Blanco family, Sergio Blanco, they actually are called Yéyo in Mexico, but Yéyo. So that's kind of how we, one of the reasons why we picked the name Yéyo. But down here, this is actually what it means to us, and get back to the point. Traditional distilling inside. So the way that we make tequila is very, very traditional, but then it's with a modern twist. The frosted glass, the screen printing, the fact that we use a glass cork. We're not making margaritas with it. We have very different types of drinks that we use with it. They're not margaritas like most tequilas. But the core part of it is having solid roots of good juice. And that's why people come back to it over and over again. It's because it tastes great. And there's no additives in it. And, Sergio Cruz is like I said, he'll eventually be in top 5 here in the next couple of years of master distillers. And, that's a huge part of it is his quality. And, the Blancos can deliver that, and they make some of the best juice out there. So those two parts are really why we stand out from the rest. And, we get into like the expression parts, like aging in rum barrels. It's never been done before on repo. There has been tequilas that have finished their second barrel with rum. So they'll do like a bourbon, and then they'll do like a finish, like they'll do like 6 months of bourbon barrels, and they'll put it in a rum barrel for like a month or two, and they'll call it like double aged and double rum barrels or whatever. And then that kind of is what is out there. There's only like Ocho, I think, is the only brand that I know that's done that. But we did something very different by choosing that, and it was, again, to stand out. Because if we would have done bourbon, we've been exactly the same as the person next to us doing bourbon, and the taste profile would have been maybe not the same, but it would have been still in the same ballpark. But by doing rum, it was, that profile, it doesn't exist, and now it does. And that was a huge thing for us. And the demand. I mean, people waiting outside the liquor store before it opens to buy Yéyo Reposado is pretty crazy. We sold our first barrel in 48 hours at one store, 250 bottles out the door, and with no marketing behind it, just word of mouth. Reddit, people just talking, and then it just flew. People went from buying one bottle to a case.
Jesus.
We got about 33 bottles in that first store. And he actually is now our number one largest customer. He has purchased $30,000 roughly around of Yéyo Reposado. He has 14 to 33 bottles of every single barrel, so all 12. So he has around 200 plus bottles in his collection of Repo.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
For him. Yeah,
really.
And he never bought our Blanco before.
I will say I've had the Reposado and the Blanco, and love them both. And I kind of want to bookmark what you said about not being margarita focused, which I never thought about with tequila, but a lot of tequilas are just focused on that one drink.
Yeah.
But Yéyo, obviously, you can do so many different things with it. I want to bookmark that and get back to that at some point. But I'm interested in the go-to-market strategy.
Yeah.
It's my impression that not even just tequila, but the alcohol industry in general is dominated by like a few big people. And it's very difficult to get alcohol to the masses, right? I mean, you can only think of really a handful in my head that have really taken off in the last 5 or so years. But not to say that Yéyo can't do that, because it's fantastic. So what are you guys doing to kind of counteract that? Like, enter the market, where are you starting, and where do you see that expanding to?
Yeah, great. I'd say the biggest part, and the reason why I think we can weather storm, is we have very low overhead. And I think low overhead helps if there's any type of shift in the market or things change. We have no employees. We have some 1099 people. None of us on the board take a salary or anything like that. We already have our day job, so our income is secure that way. We have no office. We're all remote. Our lawyer, one of our partners and slash judge, he's in Alpharetta, Georgia. Our head of sales, board member, he's in California. I'm in LA. Our seed investor, he's in Orange County. So none of us are having to hit this big office and expense. And then we have a warehouse that we partner with in Texas to keep everything. But for the most part, we run lean and mean. Our supply chain and our inventory management is spot on, so we're not carrying too much inventory. We move through our product very quickly. So a lot of this comes down to like good cash flow and good business decision, and not spending too much money on things that don't make sense. And we're very hyper focused on, only investing in things that actually move the needle. And we stay away, and we have to say no a lot of the times for things that just don't make sense. And if it doesn't help grow the brand, we say no to it. And it has to be a significant amount, or we just don't do it at all. But to kind of break into the ground and gain customer by customer, it all starts with one bottle, and then a case, and then a half, let's just say like a half pallet, and then a pallet, and then eventually you can move into selling several pallets to your distributors, and then you get into forecasting and turns. But a lot has to do is one by one. You have to gain a customer one by one, and eventually it starts growing, and there's a domino effect. And as long as you're authentic and you're doing it because you love to do it, that should keep spreading, because word of mouth is actually stronger than any other marketing you can do. If you are happy about something, you'll tell a friend or family, and they're more influenced by that than they are seeing a marketing ad. One thing that we do that's different too is we like to take the customer on the journey of the starting the whole process of any new product or anything that we're doing. So like an example, I was just in Mexico last week, and we were bottling our Blanco batch 120. Just sold through the 110 we made back in June. I started the Blanco 120 back in May, and it was finally finished last week so we could bottle it. The story post was basically us bottling it, all the people in the factory doing it, the grounds, and now we have these new barrels that we're aging too that will be filled next week. We're showing people where the barrel starts, right? Barrel, you have to clean them up, we have to mark them, new pattern we're putting on them, and we're starting to do that with our high proof. We're starting to do that with our experimental barrel for our spice apple cider barrel that we're doing within Yéyo. We're doing this barrel experiment. So over the next year, we're going to be focused on that throughout the next year, letting customers know how it's turning out and trying. And if that ends up being something that turns out well, the customers will already have like a year relationship with that before we've even launched it. And we're doing the same thing now with the Reposado. We went from 12 barrels, now we're doing 28, and they're seeing it like it's going to get aged. And I'll show some videos of it getting aged, and then we'll be checking up on it. So it's taking them along the journey of this happening versus just saying, hey, we got a product, go buy it. So they feel like they're a part of it. And then we also ask their feedback. We just did the Reposado seals. We said, which one do you like, A or B, for the new ones we're doing? So we have an owner's edition for Star Engine. We have the Tropical edition, and we have the traditional edition. And we let them decide on which seals they like the most. So that they feel like they're a part of this making decisions for the brand, which they were at that on that particular example. They picked the seals, and now we're making those seals based on that feedback. So I think that's something that I don't see any other brand doing, is including them in these conversations basically through social, and then allowing them to vote. I think that's a pretty part. So
I can speak to it as an investor. You feel like a part of it, and as a customer, when I've given people bottles and they've tried it, feeling a part of something is really important to building a brand. And I think this, the second thing which you kind of touched on is just your innovative, the type of innovation you're doing, aging in rum barrels, which is kind of what leads me into my next question is, where is this innovative distilling, let's call it, where is that sparked from? Is that sparked from Sergio? Is that sparked from you yourself? Where is all these experiments, where are the ideas coming from?
So I do, it mainly comes from me, but what I do is I take those ideas and I bounce them off of other key stakeholders. So an example, I went to Felipe Camarena is like he makes G4, he makes amazing tequila. Like, there's like 4 brands that come out of that distillery. It's the distillery is called El Pandillo. It's like the number 3 distillery in the whole world for tequila. Amazing guy. He loves the repo. He signed off on it. The reposado we just released this year, and he's trying to do things kind of similar too, with different types of casks and sizes. So a couple of the things I threw by him was one of them was the spice apple cider barrel, and he's like, I think you should do it. So I run all this stuff by Sergio too, the Master Distiller, and then just I'm also trying to look at who hasn't done it and what profile would it possibly bring. We could have done like gin barrels. We could have done like maybe X mezcal barrels. There's a bunch of different directions you could go. But I was trying to think of the profile and, how unique would it be and all those variables kind of coming up with it. And then so I have the idea. I send it off to a couple people for feedback, and that kind of molds the idea. And then as that kind of grows, it starts to form light into something real and tangible. And that's where we are today. So the rum casks were a complete gamble. That's why we only did 12 barrels. We had no idea how it was going to taste. It could have been terrible. We would have been stuck with 12 barrels, and that could have been the reality. But when we tried it, we were like, oh my gosh, this is insane. So we knew we were on something great. And that's why we are doing now 28. And instead of going all out with the cider barrels, I thought we'd start with one, offset the risk. And I think it's going to turn out great, but I won't know. But I do think, though, once this does turn out and the profile is amazing, I believe this in Yéyo every single year. If we do this with batch 1, batch 2, every single year, it'll be the drink you drink during October, November. It'll be like an autumn drink. So it has like that kind of apple spice. That's the thing you want to like cozy up next to. If you're going to drink in a Yéyo, that would be it. So we'll own a quarter of the year because this has that profile that doesn't exist today. And there's no additives. It's literally just the barrel giving back to the juice. And that's what's creating that kind of profile. That's what I think will come out of it. So, but a lot of this innovation, it all starts with me, and this is what I do in my day job. I have to think of different ways to, move the needle. And it doesn't just happen by, more advertising. It has to be clever, it has to be different. And that's the only way you can kind of break through the clutter. And so constantly have to be doing something different. But the main part here is the customer. If the customer wants it, the brand, the product will be successful. But if the customer doesn't pick it up, there's no brand. You have the most expensive marketing in the world, but if they don't want
there's no fit. There's no fit. There's no customer.
There. So, yeah, exactly. So, and then these things. I mean, the response with the cider, the spice apple cider barrels has been crazy. Like, people want it now, and obviously we can't do it now. We have to wait to see how it turns out. And I just did a post yesterday about a high proof that we are teasing for 2024. I had so many responses of people that want to buy the high proof. They're like, give me my wallet. I want the high proof. And it's crazy. Even our distributors, we've already basically committed 8,000 bottles of the high proof. We haven't even made a drop of it yet. I don't even have a glass order in yet for it. But that's because of just word of mouth and social and the demand that they're hearing and what they'll commit to. So almost a whole run. It runs around 10,560 for a minimum amount for something like that. And we've already got commitment on 8,000, and we haven't even pulled the trigger yet on it. We will. It's just, so those are things like leading us to the direction, like, let's make the investment. And by the time it's packaged and done, it'll already be sold. It just literally needs to land on the docks of the distributor, and then within a 30 to 45 day net, we'll have the cash back. So that's how we're doing all this. I mean, the repo on this next run will most likely be gone in all markets, probably in 45 days. And to move that much from the shelf out the door is pretty cool for a brand like ours that's not even that big. Most of the big brands aren't even doing that. Their stuff moves out a little slower, given that one product they're doing to sell through 100% of it is pretty great. So so we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep being the ones that do something different, and we'll be known for that. One other thing before I give it back to you is we've also teased the idea about doing a limited edition agave vice Hoven, which it all got sparked by a customer creating this cool picture. This is agave vice of Sergio Cruz and me from like the 80s. And it was like people just went crazy for it. And I was like, what would be cool to do a Hoven? Well, I know if we did a Hoven, we would sell all of it before we even bottled any of it.
It's a fantastic idea.
Basically, out to the but then next year after that, we would do something different. It'd be like maybe a different setting or something. But these are the things other brands are not doing. I don't know any other brand that would be able to pull this off. And why aren't the big guys doing it? I don't know. They probably don't have the creativity to do it, or maybe they don't want to risk it. But we're agile. We can move quick. We're small. We can make decisions, and it's it makes good sense. Margins are good, and it's a good idea to do, and we love doing it too. We're bringing something new to the market that no one else has.
So, you've clearly loved doing this, and it took you. You have a 12-year relationship with the family down in Jalisco. Can you talk about how that relationship grew to? And me and Connor were talking earlier. I feel like every guy out there, or most guys out there, their dream is to either own a bar, own their own whiskey, own their own liquor, or own their own beer or something like that. And so can you kind of bring me through your journey a little bit to founding Yéyo and, where that passion may have started?
Yes. Yeah, so I was just wrapping up college. This was a long time ago. This is, back in 2007 or 2006. I think I just finished my second degree working at Intel. So I had a lot of time. I'd been working full-time at Intel, and then they asked me to go back to school, get another degree or get a master's. And so I was used to just full-time school, full-time work, just like that forever. So, 70, 80 hours a week was like a normal week. So then I finished college, the second degree, and I was like, I feel like I had all this time. 40 hours isn't a lot after you've been doing 70, 80 all the time. So I started digging into kind of what I felt like I was learning from this marketing degree at a BS in marketing. And it felt like it was, you need to have a product or service that's working in 24 hours a 7 or 24/7 versus you working for someone 9 to 5. Something that can work after 5. Something that can work on the weekends, something that's always fluctuating, always moving. So something like a service or a product. And I'd always wanted to have my own spirit, kind of like what you just said right there. And when I was digging into the data, I was looking at what is, super popular, where it's like there's too much going on. Vodka is a great example. There's like 7,000 brands. You can make vodka out of your garage. It's just there's too many people in the space making it, and the margins are not there, and it's nothing really kind of special and unique about it. With tequila, is very similar to like champagne. It has to come from that region. It has to come from France. It only be made there. And with tequila, it has to be made within Jalisco, and these 5 states within Jalisco. So you can't make tequila like in somewhere in the U.S. or in Australia. So that actually reduces the amount of brands there is. So back when I was finished, my neighbor next door lived in Mexico City. We flew down to Guadalajara. This is before the iPhone had released. This was a long time ago. I still had the flip phone back then. We were using a paper map. We didn't know anyone. We went down to Guadalajara and we started driving. And we went to the lowlands first. We came back to Guadalajara. And then we drove up to the Highlands, and we basically stopped at distillery asking to try the agave out of the cooker, not the tequila. And basically, the Blancos was one of those distilleries. It's very, very small. You drive by it in maybe 5 seconds. It's a very small distillery compared to these other distilleries that are like the size of like a Costco, maybe even bigger than a Costco. So the Blancos is like the size of I mean, the distillery itself is very small. Like, trying to give it a good size here, maybe like the size of like a decent sized hardware store or something, but nothing like a Home Depot or Costco or anything like that. So, anyways, we show up there. We ask to try the agave. My neighbor's translating in Spanish, and they say no. So I get back in the car. I ask him to translate for me. He tells me, I say, let's repitch it. Let's go back in. They allow us to try it. I think it was like the last stop of the day. It's like 6 o'clock. No guards at the gate. They're about to close up for the day. So they allowed us to try the agave, cooked agave, and it was the best cooked agave I had tried on this whole trip. And I was like, we have to work with them. It was so good, I could have sold it on a stick because it was that good. I mean, so since then, I've been going back there and we developed a relationship. But back then, there was no internet access. Everything was done by FedEx. There's no book on how to do this either. So there's a lot of dead ends. So it took me about 2.5 years before we released our first batch. And so I basically left Intel at that time. I went full force with Yéyo, and I didn't know what I was doing either. Software guy. I hired one of my friends who was a used car salesman, and Yéyo become the number 3 selling tequila in 8.5 months in Oregon.
That's awesome.
Where I'm from, right behind Don Julio. We almost have the same numbers as Don Julio Silver. Patron is very far in first place. They're like a mile ahead of Don Julio of everyone else. But so Don Julio and there's Yéyo. And for 2 guys that don't know what they're doing in this space, for almost us to hit Don Julio's monthly numbers in silver was crazy. But back then, I was like 25, 26. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't managing right. And we blew through all the Yéyo, and basically we weren't able to basically remake it again because I just didn't have the cash flow right. So the brand basically died at that point. We had no more inventory, closed up shop, and that was it. Now we were fast forward like 8 or 9 years later. So I said, let's relaunch the brand. I said, I want to relaunch it smarter now. Let's do it. Let's do it right this time. So the end of November of 2019, it's basically the end of 2019, I relaunched the brand, and now growing it into what it is today. COVID did definitely take away probably about a year of us growing because bars disappeared, and as you guys all know, the world kind of changed. Everyone stayed at home, so our business kind of changed. We had to kind of change with the more online sales and that sort of thing. But now things are back to normal again. And so that's kind of the why I've known them for so long, but the brand's only been out since the end of 2019. But I kept in contact with them throughout the years during that gap, and I also went down there, not often, but I did go down there. Now I go to Mexico maybe 6 times a year, very quick trips. It's a 3-hour flight for me, an 1.5-hour drive. So I go down there to check basically every single batch we do. And sometimes I'm there for 48 hours, and then I'll head back home just to make sure everything's flowing correctly. But that's kind of my backstory. But why I say this is because you can't just go into a distillery, even if it's whiskey or bourbon, and just get respect right away. You have to, relationships take time, and if you want a really strong relationship, it takes a lot of visits. Can't just be rushed. So I can tell that we have priority over others because of our long relationship with the family and the amount of times we've gone down and the amount of time I've spent there with them over the years. We're definitely viewed differently when we go there versus people that are coming into the game now and they want to get into tequila because they're just, they think that the relationship just happens right away, but it doesn't. So you have to, it takes time, just like with anything.
Well,
so.
I love the story, and it's always refreshing how you see how important relationships are in growing a business. And I do want to say your story did kind of remind me a little bit of Turtle from Entourage and how he got into tequila. So I love that aspect. But can you tell us what your outlook is for the next 5 to 10 years with the tequila industry in general? Yeah, next 5 to 10. Like, how much do you think it will grow? Is there a chance that it will be able to top vodka as America's favorite spirit?
Yeah, so just this year, tequila is now being consumed more in the U.S. than it is whiskey. So tequila used to be number 3, whiskey is now number 3, tequila is number 2, and vodka is number 1. This is agave spirits. This is mezcal too, and tequila. But I would say vodka is probably going to take a backseat to tequila over the next 2 years, and agave spirits will be the most consumed thing in the United States. With that, you do need more brands because you have a lot more demand and you have more customers that are switching away from vodkas. So that's why brands like Yéyo will do well, because there is portfolio gap and there is demand from customers, and there is demand for brands like Yéyo out there. So I don't think it's going to slow down. It's been growing for the last 19 quarters. And customers are becoming more aware of it. It's a healthier option out of all the spirits to drink agave spirits. And it's better than, healthier than vodka and whiskey, especially if you buy the right type of brands, like the additive-free brands. So I think customers or Americans are becoming more in tune with all of that. I believe 70% of all the consumption for all the tequila in the world is happening in the U.S. And I think that's maybe Mexico and then Germany after that. But I only see it growing. I don't see this slowing down. The younger generation is buying more tequila, and I don't see it slowing down for a while. Eventually, it will slow down because, like all things, they do. But I still think it's solid. It's going to keep growing in that direction, for the at least next couple of years, before it even maybe plateaus a little bit.
So with that being said, and the industry has a lot of tailwinds, you're very passionate and driven. What is your ultimate goal? What is the end goal for Yéyo Tequila?
Good. So now with when it comes to Star Engine, I can't talk about some of these things because of the SEC regulations. But if I were to think hypothetically, we would not turn down any type of co-acquisition or MA that would happen, but we do know that there's limitations on how far we can grow the brand with the staff and people we have in place. So normally how it happens is you have a bigger company, a family will come in. There's about 30 families that basically buy into these brands, and they have an infrastructure set up in place. Let's just say Yéyo is in 1,000 locations right now. We only have basically relationships with distributors and reps. Let's just say that a company comes in, they evaluated X, they buy a percentage of it, and then they say, okay, we have 1,000 reps across the country. We're in every single state. We want to bring your brand and put it in our portfolio. And then they already have the infrastructure in place to basically, turn Yéyo into this smaller brand, and immediately we're in 50 locations or 50 markets within, say 6 months. We won't go from 1,000 locations to 10,000 locations. So that's ultimately, we know where things are going to have to go, because that's just reality. We don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to grow the brand and be a part of it as it's growing, make sure it's additive free, and there's still all those things that are there. But we do need that next leap, and that leap will happen. And then after that, there'll be probably probably want to buy the whole thing at that point, and the valuation will be higher because the brand will be worth more. We'll be selling more cases. But this is hypothetically, because we are doing a start engine campaign, and nothing's guaranteed, right? But we are also building the company for a long-term success. If an acquisition comes along, and we'll look at it carefully, and we'll think about our customers, we'll think about our shareholders, and we'll make the best judgment call based on that. But if that never happens, we're still building the company up for long-term success, where we can keep just growing it and growing it and growing as much as we can. But like with anything, it eventually gets to a point where you need support at a different level. And that's what those other kind of companies do, is they come in and they help with the infrastructure that they already have in place. And so that's kind of where I see us going. And we have a lot of great interest from outside people that really want to bring Yéyo that can pretty much triple what we're doing now. We just need to have the inventory to support it, just through connections and relationships, and getting Yéyo into places that we would never get into unless we have those relationships with those people. So, but at the end of the day, one customer at a time, and as long as we can win over fans and customers and make a great tequila, the chips will keep falling in our favor, and that's what we plan on doing. So we're not in it for the money. We love doing it. We just realize it also as a business, and we do know there's limitations on what a couple people can do.
So John, I'll wrap it up with this about the Start Engine campaign. You're raising money right now. Link is in the description below. Click it, check it out. 12 days left in the campaign. So for anybody out there that's looking to invest, what will you be using that money for? And, how will their contribution be helping Yéyo grow into, the vision that you just shared?
Great. Yes. So all that money, it's all broken down in the SEC filing, and everything that we're doing is 55% of it, I believe, goes straight to inventory. We have a little bit for cash flow management. We have some for R&D. I want to say it's 3% for R&D. That's things like the spiced apple cider barrel, buying new equipment that basically we think is going to help with the profile taste. So we haven't even talked about that, but we're looking at a more advanced way of regulating the temperature for the regulator water, for the radiator water during second installation. So things like that. But it's not going back to paying off our seed funding. We're already doing that through sales ongoing. That's all in the filing too. But no one's getting a bonus. There's no paychecks coming out of it. It's pretty much basically just cash flow management and inventory and some R&D and marketing. That's 100% where the funds are going, and that's why we're doing it. We've hit this point where we're moving through it quickly. Cash flow is important. We want to get ahead of inventory. And what keeps happening is we basically, right as the product is getting done, we've just run out of the last lot. So I'd rather not have it so close, but it's basically like a 2-week gap right now where 100% sold out of 110. I have 120 just got finished yesterday. 120 will be back and already shipping out to different markets next week. So it's just too close. I'd prefer to have more inventory, and that's really where the funds are going. That's our focus. And there, we don't talk about any of the acquisition stuff because, again, that's not what's in there. That's all unknown. But I'm just saying, hypothetically, if you ask me that question, that's where I realistically think things will go, because that's where most companies like this would go. That is hypothetical scenario. But long term is our path, and build it for success long term. The acquisitions are never guaranteed, so that's where our focus is if it happens, awesome, we look at it. If it doesn't, we can keep on.
So I lied. I have one more question. So as
Sure.
I guess anybody that kind of knows tequila knows probably the biggest boom of a tequila brand in the last 5 years, decade or so, was Casamigos. George Clooney's Casamigos, pretty good tequila. I prefer Yéyo. So I guess my final question would be, why can Yéyo be just as big, if not bigger, than something like that?
They had a lot of great things going for them at that time. I think the timing was perfect. The consumers were on Patron for so many years. 15, 20 years. And I think Patron wasn't doing anything really innovative at the time. And then you have Casamigos come in with this kind of fresh look and feel. And that same fresh look and feel that's from 5 years ago is still the same branding and stuff they're doing today. They haven't changed any of it. So their focus was, I believe, just grow. And the tequila did taste it better. Back then it was from a different distillery. It was crafted differently. And then they, eventually, I think they got bought out a couple of years ago. And I think they're doing 175,000 cases a year. And now they're selling around 2.2 million cases a year. So after their acquisition, they've definitely exploded when it comes to growth. The company that bought them has
Tito's was kind of the same thing.
15 times what they're. So, but anyways, I would say that it takes time and it takes money, and I think timing's everything with it too, and having the right positioning, the right price point. And I don't know if a lot of people remember, but Casamigos was actually a lot cheaper back in the day, and what they did was they slowly incrementally upped the price, and now it's actually, I think it's around $50 a bottle. But I remember when it first launched, it was like a $25 a bottle, and I remember some other brands that have actually done the opposite. They've had to go down. Casamigos has slowly gone up, and it's smart of them to do it that way too. And we do that with Yéyo too. We slowly increase the price. We don't want to collect any dust. We want it to go off the shelf. We want it to live at home or a bar or a restaurant. And so we are always going kind of slowly up in price, while others are collecting dust on the shelf and they're having to drop their price, or they just get discoed. So to answer your question, it would, all the stars would have to align to exceed something like them. That's a pretty big, phenomena that happens maybe once every decade, like a brand like that. That doesn't mean that you can't be successful if you're not selling, close to 200,000 cases a year. And that's including all of their expressions too. So it wasn't just like a Blanco. We launched the Blanco and not the rest of them because we wanted to focus on getting one correct and then have the opportunity to introduce other expressions as we start to learn our customers and what their needs are. And we also feel like it's like a rebirth of the brand every time we come out with a new expression. And instead of just having, Blanco, Repo, and Yéyo out there and just push those all forward with no kind of building of it, we kind of look at the expressions like a brand new movie and like creating like a movie trailer with it. It's like the second movie is like the Repo, third movie like being Yéyo, and it's like a growth of the brand. And that's kind of how we view the different expressions and projects we're doing versus just all launching at the same time, which is what almost everyone does. They just launch all of them, and your customer base isn't the same. The way you drink is not the same. You have different strategies, and they're not the same thing, even though they're all from the same brand, not the same thing. So it's hard to target, different customers when you launch 3 or 4 at the same time versus slowly doing it, building up your base.
Well, Jon, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for the time. And, I'll continue to be someone who pushes Yéyo to my friends. I'm a huge fan, and I hope everybody goes down the link below. Yéyo Tequila on Start Engine. 12 days left in their campaign, so don't miss out on the chance to invest. And so, Jon, thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed it. I know Connor did.
Thank you, Jon.
So
I enjoyed it too.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say is like just by you saying that, like that's how I also view the brand too. We were 4 people, and now we're almost 300 strong. And the way that you view the brand, because now you have skin in the game,
100%.
If you didn't have skin in the game, so now when we end this closing round, we have 300 investors. It doesn't matter if it's $250 or $50,000. Skin in the game, they're going to think of it differently. They're going to talk about it. They're going to push the brand forward at a different way than it was before we launched the campaign. So that's another reason why we did it, was we really want the 300 people or hundreds of people to own it, not just...
Well, I'll add to that. I will say that my aunt also invested alongside me. She was a huge fan, so I had to give her a shout out too. So with that being said, thank you, Jon. And for all the listeners out there, thank you for listening to The Next Big Thing, and we will see you next time. So long.
Bye-bye.
Yes.